Yeah, my story wasn't easy, but I survived the most humiliating day of my life and came out stronger than ever.
I've known her since she was a little girl. When I heard her story, I got a lump in my throat.
My name is Sarah Martin, and this is about the day I discovered my true worth wasn't measured by how well I could serve others, but by how courageously I could stand up for myself. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. June 15th, 2023. The day I would marry David, my college sweetheart of 8 years. We'd been through everything together, his law school struggles, my mother's cancer battle, building our careers from the ground up. I thought I knew him inside and out. I thought I knew his family, too. Boy, was I wrong. The morning started like any wedding day should. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by my bridesmaids, my sister Emma, my best friend since high school Jess, and my cousin Lily. The sun was streaming through the lace curtains my grandmother had made decades ago, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. We were giggling over mimosas and sharing stories about David and me, painting each other's nails in the soft pink I'd chosen to match the peonies in my bouquet. "Sarah, you're literally glowing," Emma said, carefully applying a thin coat of polish to my ring finger. "I've never seen you this happy." And I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. David and I had saved for 3 years to pay for this wedding ourselves. We wanted it to be ours. Not his parents' vision, not mine, but ours. We'd chosen every detail together, from the vintage lace on my dress to the string quartet that would play during the ceremony. The venue was a historic inn about an hour outside of town, with gardens that bloomed in perfect succession throughout the seasons. We'd booked it during peony season specifically because they were my favorite flowers. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock, with cocktails immediately following in the garden, then dinner and dancing in the main hall. Simple, elegant, and exactly what we'd dreamed of. Or so I thought. Around noon, as I was having my hair styled in loose waves that cascaded down my back, my phone buzzed with a text from David's mother, Patricia. "Sarah, darling, small change of plans. See you soon." I should have known right then that something was off. Patricia never called me darling. She barely called me Sarah. Usually, it was just David's girlfriend, even after we'd been engaged for a year and a half. But I was too caught up in the magic of the morning to worry about it. My mom helped me into my dress, a stunning A-line gown with delicate beading that caught the light when I moved. It had been my grandmother's, altered to fit me perfectly. As she fastened the tiny pearl buttons that ran up the back, she whispered, "Your grandmother would be so proud. You look absolutely radiant." The photographer captured every moment. Me laughing with my bridesmaids, my dad seeing me in my dress for the first time and tearing up, my mom adjusting my veil one last time before we headed to the church. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as I'd imagined. We arrived at the venue at 2:30, giving us plenty of time for final photos and touch-ups before the guests arrived. The inn looked like something out of a fairy tale, with ivy climbing the stone walls and the gardens in full bloom. Our florist had done an incredible job, white and pink peonies everywhere, just like I'd requested. But as we pulled up to the main entrance, I noticed something odd. There were cars in the parking lot already, a lot of cars, and I could hear music coming from inside the building. Not the soft classical music we'd chosen for the pre-ceremony ambiance, but something much more upbeat. "That's strange," Emma said, helping me out of the car while being careful not to step on my train. "Weren't we supposed to be the first ones here?" My dad went ahead to investigate while my mom and the bridesmaids helped me with my dress. When he came back, his face was tight with concern. "Sarah, honey, there's something you need to know," he said gently. "It looks like David's family has made some changes to the plan." "Changes? What kind of changes?" We'd gone over every detail 100 times. The timeline was set, the vendors were confirmed, the guests knew exactly when to arrive. What could possibly have changed? I walked through the front doors of the inn, my heart starting to race, and immediately understood what my dad meant. The main hall, our reception space, was already full of people. David's extended family, his parents' friends, business associates I'd never met. They were eating, drinking, laughing, celebrating, without me. The tables were set differently than we'd planned. Instead of the romantic centerpieces we'd chosen, low arrangements of peonies and roses with candles, there were tall, ostentatious displays of lilies and orchids. The color scheme was completely different too. Where we'd chosen soft pinks and creams, everything was now stark white and gold. "Sarah!" Patricia appeared at my elbow, wearing a dress that was absolutely inappropriate for a mother of the groom, or anyone at a wedding, for that matter. It was white. Not ivory, not cream, but pure white, with beading that rivaled my own dress. "There you are, dear. We've been waiting for you." "Waiting for me?" I was confused. "Patricia, what's going on? Why are all these people here? The ceremony isn't for another hour and a half." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, didn't David tell you? We decided to move things up a bit. The ceremony was lovely. Such a shame you missed it." The world tilted. I felt like I was going to be sick. "What do you mean, I missed it?" "Well, you were running so late with all that primping and picture-taking," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "We couldn't keep all these important people waiting. David's father's business partners flew in from Chicago just for this. We had to start on time." I stared at her, unable to process what she was saying. "You had my wedding without me?" "Don't be so dramatic, Sarah. It's not like you weren't invited. You're here now, aren't you? Although," she looked me up and down critically, "that dress is a bit much for a reception, don't you think? Very attention-seeking. My grandmother's dress. The dress I'd dreamed of wearing to marry the love of my life. Attention-seeking. Where's David?" I managed to ask. "Oh, he's around somewhere, talking to guests. You know how it is. The groom has responsibilities." She paused, then added with false sweetness, "Speaking of responsibilities, we could really use some help in the kitchen. The caterer seems overwhelmed, and we need someone who knows their way around food service. You worked in restaurants during college, didn't you?" I felt my bridesmaids' close ranks around me. Emma's hand found mine and squeezed tight. Jess stepped forward, her voice cold as ice. "Excuse me, but did you just ask the bride to work in the kitchen at her own wedding?" Patricia's smile faltered for just a moment. "Well, it's not really her wedding anymore, is it? That part's over. This is just a party now. And Sarah always was so good with domestic things." Domestic things. I had a master's degree in business administration. I was a senior marketing manager at a Fortune 500 company. I'd been the one to handle all the wedding planning, all the vendor coordination, all the details that had made this day possible. But to Patricia, I was just good with domestic things. "Where's David?" I asked again, my voice stronger this time. "I told you, he's—" "Patricia." My voice cut through her excuses like a blade. "Where is my husband?" She pointed toward the bar, where I could see David in his tuxedo, champagne flute in hand, laughing with a group of his father's golf buddies. He looked relaxed, happy even, like this was exactly how he'd planned for his wedding day to go. I walked over to him, my dress train sweeping behind me, my bridesmaids forming a protective barrier around me. The men he was talking to noticed me first, their conversation dying away as they took in my appearance. "David?" I said quietly. He turned, and for a split second, I saw guilt flash across his face. But it was quickly replaced by something else. Annoyance. "Sarah, there you are. We were wondering when you'd show up." When I'd show up. To my own wedding. "David, what happened? Why did you start without me?" He shrugged, actually shrugged like this was no big deal. "Mom thought it would be better this way. Less stress for everyone. You know how you get when you're nervous?" How I get when I'm nervous. Like wanting to be present for my own wedding ceremony was some kind of character flaw. "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We planned this together, every detail. How could you get married without me?" Look, Sarah, we're married now, okay? That's what matters. The ceremony is just formality anyway. The real celebration is the party. He gestured around the room. And this is a great party. Dad's really impressed with the venue. I felt like I was living in some kind of nightmare. This man, who I'd loved for 8 years, who I'd supported through law school, who I'd planned to spend the rest of my life with, had just dismissed our wedding ceremony as a formality. David, you got married without me, I said, needing him to understand the magnitude of what he'd done. I got married to you, he corrected. The officiant had your proxy. It's perfectly legal. My proxy. They'd used my maid of honor as a stand-in. Emma looked mortified as she shook her head vigorously. Sarah, I had no idea. I thought I was just standing where you would stand for photos. I would never have agreed to— It doesn't matter, David interrupted. It's done. We're married. Now can we please just enjoy the party? You're making a scene. Making a scene. At my own wedding. That I wasn't invited to. I looked around the room at all these people I barely knew, eating food I'd chosen, listening to music I'd selected, celebrating a marriage that had happened without me. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. The cake. Our cake. The 3-tiered masterpiece we'd spent hours choosing, with delicate sugar flowers and the cake topper we'd found at a vintage shop in the city. It had been cut. They'd had the cake-cutting ceremony without me, too. You cut the cake, I said, my voice hollow. Mom thought it would be nice to get it out of the way, David said, not even looking at me. You know how you are about dessert timing. How I am about dessert timing, as if having opinions about my own wedding was some kind of personality disorder. That's when Patricia appeared again, this time with a server's apron in her hands. Sarah, dear, I really do need you to help in the kitchen. We're running low on appetizers and the caterer says they need an extra pair of hands. Since you're not really needed out here— She held out the apron expectantly. I stared at the apron. At this woman who had orchestrated my exclusion from my own wedding and was now asking me to serve the guests who had participated in it. You want me to put on an apron and work in the kitchen at my own wedding, I said slowly. Well, it's not really your wedding anymore, dear. That part's over. This is just a party, and parties need hosts. David's doing his part with the guests. You could do yours with the food. The room had gone quiet around us. People were staring now, sensing drama. I could feel the eyes of David's family, his parents' friends, his business associates, all watching to see what I would do. Sarah, just take the apron, David said quietly. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder than it needs to be. For whom? For him? For his mother? For the guests who had participated in the elaborate prank that was my wedding day. I looked at the apron in Patricia's hands. I looked at David, who couldn't even meet my eyes. I looked at my bridesmaids, who were staring at me with horror and disbelief. I looked at my parents, who had worked extra jobs to help pay for this wedding, standing in the corner looking completely bewildered. And then I made a decision that would change everything. No, I said simply. No? Patricia's voice was sharp. No, I will not put on an apron and work in the kitchen at my own wedding. I will not serve food to people who thought it was appropriate to exclude me from my own ceremony. I will not pretend that this is normal or acceptable or okay. The room was dead silent now. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. Sarah, you're being ridiculous, David said, his voice low and threatening. Just do what my mother asked. What your mother asked, I repeated. What about what I asked, David? What about what I wanted? What about what we planned together? This is what I wanted, he said, and the words hit me like a physical blow. This is better. More efficient. Less drama. Less drama. That's what my exclusion from my own wedding ceremony had been about. Efficiency and drama reduction. I looked around the room one more time, at all these people who had been complicit in this betrayal. And then I noticed something else. Something that made everything click into place. The bills. All the vendor bills, the ones I'd paid for with my own money over the past 3 years. were sitting on a table near the entrance. I'd seen them earlier but hadn't thought much of it. But now I understood. They were there so David's parents could reimburse themselves for the improvements they'd made to our wedding that I had paid for. I walked over to the table, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor, and picked up the stack of receipts. 3 years' worth of payments, the venue deposit, the catering, the flowers, the music, the cake, the photographer, everything, all paid for by me. "You know what?" I said, turning back to face the room. "You're right, Patricia. This isn't my wedding anymore, because my wedding was the one I planned and paid for. This is something else entirely." I held up the receipts. "These are the bills for everything you see here. The venue, the food, the flowers, the music, the cake that you cut without me. Every single thing in this room was paid for by me." Patricia's face went pale. "Sarah, don't be what? Don't be accurate? Don't be factual? Every vendor in this room has been paid by me. This celebration that you're all enjoying? It exists because of my money, my planning, my work." I looked directly at David. "You want to know what's dramatic? Having a wedding without the bride? You want to know what's ridiculous? Asking the person who paid for everything to serve food to the people who excluded her from her own ceremony?" The room was completely silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I'm going to leave. I'm going to walk out of here with these receipts, and I'm going to contest every single charge. I'm going to call every vendor and explain that the services they provided were not authorized by me for this event, since this event was not the one I contracted for." "You can't do that," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, I can. My name is on every contract. My credit card paid every bill. And this event that you're all enjoying? It's not the event I paid for. The event I paid for included the bride." I turned to face the room full of guests. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate David's marriage. I'm sorry I can't stay to serve you appetizers, but I have somewhere else to be." I walked toward the door, my bridesmaids flanking me, my parents close behind. As I reached the threshold, I turned back one final time. "Oh, and David, you might want to call your lawyer, because the marriage license you signed, it's invalid. You can't get married without both parties present, and a proxy doesn't count in this state. So, congratulations on your very expensive party. I hope it was worth it." The last thing I saw as I walked out was Patricia's face, white as her inappropriate dress, as she realized what had just happened. We drove back to my parents' house in silence. I was still in my grandmother's dress, still had my hair done in those perfect waves, still had my makeup intact, but I felt like a completely different person than the one who had woken up that morning. My mom made tea while my dad called our lawyer. Emma and Jess helped me out of my dress and into comfortable clothes. Lily called her girlfriend, who happened to be a paralegal, to get advice on the legal aspects of what had happened. "Sarah," my mom said gently, sitting beside me on the couch, "I'm so sorry. I can't believe they did that to you." "I can't either," I admitted. 8 years, Mom. 8 years with someone who thought it was okay to exclude me from my own wedding. "What are you going to do?" Emma asked. I thought about it. What was I going to do? I was 29 years old. I had a good job. I had my own apartment that I'd kept during the engagement. I had friends who clearly had my back. I had family who loved me. I had everything I needed to start over. "I'm going to contest every charge," I said. "I'm going to get my money back. I'm going to cancel the honeymoon. I'm going to return every wedding gift. And I'm going to move on with my life." "What about David?" Jess asked quietly. "What about him? He made his choice. He chose his mother's approval over his partnership with me. He chose efficiency over love. He chose to exclude me from the most important day of our lives together. That tells me everything I need to know about what our marriage would have been like." My phone had been buzzing constantly since we'd left the venue. David, Patricia, even David's father had all tried to call. I finally turned it off. The next morning, I woke up early and got to work. I called every vendor, explained the situation, and began the process of disputing the charges. Most of them were sympathetic and agreed to refund my money, especially once I explained that the event they'd provided services for was not the event I'd contracted for. The florist was appalled. "They had the ceremony without you? The bride? That's horrible. Of course I'll refund your money." The caterer was equally shocked. "I was wondering why you weren't there for the ceremony. I thought maybe you were sick or something. I had no idea they'd planned it that way." The photographer was the most upset. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I should have refused to photograph a wedding without the bride. I'll refund every penny and give you all the photos from the morning getting ready. Those are yours." One by one, the vendors agreed to refunds. By the end of the week, I had recovered about 80% of what I'd spent. The venue was trickier because they'd provided the service. But when I explained that I'd been excluded from the event I'd paid for, they agreed to a partial refund. David called constantly, but I didn't answer. He sent flowers, which I donated to a local nursing home. He showed up at my apartment, but I didn't let him in. He even had his lawyer call my lawyer, but there wasn't much they could do. The marriage was indeed invalid, and the vendors had agreed to the refunds. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Emma. "Sarah, you need to see this," she said, her voice tight with anger. "See what?" Patricia posted photos from the wedding on Facebook. She's calling it David's Special Day and talking about how she helped plan the perfect celebration for her son. I looked at the photos on my laptop. There was David, looking handsome in his tux, cutting the cake with his mother. There was the ceremony, with Emma standing in as my proxy, looking uncomfortable and confused. There was the reception, with all those people I barely knew, dancing and laughing and having a wonderful time. And there, in the comments, were dozens of people praising Patricia for her beautiful planning and asking where the bride was. "She's telling people you were too emotional to attend and that you'll have a private ceremony later," Emma said. "She's making it sound like this was your idea. Too emotional to attend my own wedding." Of course, that's the story she was telling. I screenshotted everything and forwarded it to my lawyer. If Patricia wanted to play games with the truth, I had the receipts to prove what had really happened. The story spread quickly through our social circle. By the end of the week, most of our mutual friends had heard some version of what had happened. The responses were mixed. Some people were appalled and reached out to offer support. Others seemed to buy Patricia's version of events and distance themselves from me. I realized that this was probably for the best. If someone could hear the story of a bride being excluded from her own wedding and think that was reasonable, they weren't the kind of person I wanted in my life anyway. A month later, I was settling into my new routine. I'd thrown myself into work, started therapy to process what had happened, and was slowly rebuilding my social life. I'd also started dating again, though I was taking it very slowly. That's when I got a call from an unexpected source. "Sarah? This is Margaret Chen from Channel 7 News. I heard about what happened at your wedding, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to tell your story on air." I was hesitant at first. The last thing I wanted was to become some kind of viral sensation. But Margaret explained that she'd been investigating a trend of similar stories: brides being excluded from their own weddings by controlling in-laws or partners. "It's happening more often than you might think," she said. "And I think your story could help other women who are going through similar situations." After thinking about it for a few days, I agreed to the interview. If sharing my story could help even one other woman avoid what I'd been through, it would be worth it. The interview aired on a Tuesday night. I told the whole story, from the morning preparations to walking out with the receipts. I talked about the importance of financial independence, about recognizing red flags in relationships, about the difference between compromise and capitulation. The response was overwhelming. Women from all over the country reached out to share their own stories of wedding day betrayals, controlling in-laws, and partners who chose their families over their relationships. Many of them thanked me for showing them that it was possible to walk away, even from a situation that seemed impossible to escape. But the most surprising response came from David himself. He called me the day after the interview aired. "Sarah, I saw the news story," he said. his voice quiet. I owe you an apology. Yes, you do, I said simply. I've been thinking about what happened, and I realize I was wrong. Really wrong. What we did to you was unforgivable. What you did to me, I corrected. Don't hide behind we, David. You made the choice to exclude me from our wedding. You made the choice to prioritize your mother's wishes over your partnership with me. You made the choice to ask me to serve food to people who had humiliated me. You're right, he said. I was a coward. I was so afraid of confronting my mother that I threw away the best thing in my life. Yes, you did. Is there any chance we could try again? I'll stand up to my mother. I'll make it right. I thought about it for a long moment. A year ago, maybe even 6 months ago, I might have been tempted. But the woman who had walked out of that wedding venue was not the same woman who had walked in. No, David, I said. There isn't. Because this wasn't just about your mother. This was about you. The man I fell in love with would never have let this happen. The man I fell in love with would have fought for me, would have protected me, would have made sure I felt valued and respected. You showed me that you're not that man. I could change, he said desperately. Maybe you could. But I've already changed. I've learned my worth, and I've learned that I deserve better than someone who has to change into a decent partner. I deserve someone who already is one. He was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't undo what happened. Sorry doesn't give me back my wedding day. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that you thought it was acceptable to exclude me from the most important day of our lives together. What can I do to make this right? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. The only thing you can do is learn from this and never treat another woman the way you treated me. I hung up the phone and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. Really, truly over. 6 months later, I was in a completely different place. I'd been promoted at work, I'd moved to a new apartment with a better view, and I'd started dating someone new. His name was Marcus, and he was everything David wasn't. Confident in himself, respectful of my independence, and absolutely appalled when I told him my story. She asked you to work in the kitchen at your own wedding, he said, his voice incredulous. And he thought that was reasonable? He thought it was efficient, I said with a laugh. Drama reduction, he called it. The only drama I see is him and his mother, Marcus said, pulling me closer. You dodged a bullet there, Sarah. I know, I said. I really know. We were at a friend's wedding, and I was surprised to find that I wasn't bitter or sad. I was genuinely happy for the couple, genuinely enjoying the celebration. I'd been worried that my experience would ruin weddings for me forever, but it hadn't. It had just made me more appreciative of what a real wedding should be, a celebration of love, partnership, and mutual respect. You know what I keep thinking about? Marcus said as we watched the bride and groom have their first dance. What? That moment when you walked out with the receipts. That was the most badass thing I've ever heard. I laughed. I was terrified. I had no idea if I was doing the right thing. You were doing the only thing. You were standing up for yourself. You were showing everyone in that room that you knew your worth and wouldn't accept less. It felt like the hardest thing I'd ever done. The hardest things usually are the most important ones. A year later, I was invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference. The organizer had seen my news interview and wanted me to talk about financial independence and standing up for yourself in relationships. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of women who had come to learn and grow and support each other, I felt more confident than I ever had in my life. My name is Sarah Martin, I said, and I want to tell you about the day I learned my worth. I told the story again, but this time it felt different. This time, it wasn't about the pain and betrayal. It was about the strength I'd found, the lessons I'd learned, the life I'd built for myself afterward. The most important thing I learned, I said, is that your worth isn't determined by how well you can serve others, or how little space you take up, or how accommodating you can be. Your worth is inherent. It's not something you have to earn or prove or defend. It's something you have simply by existing. The applause was thunderous. After my talk, women came up to me to share their own stories, to thank me for my courage, to tell me how my story had helped them make difficult decisions in their own lives. One woman, probably in her 50s, grabbed my hand with tears in her eyes. "I've been married for 30 years," she said, "and my husband's family has treated me like a servant the entire time. Your story gave me the courage to finally stand up for myself. Thank you." Another woman, much younger, told me she'd called off her engagement after hearing my story. "I realized that my fiancé was making all the decisions about our wedding without consulting me," she said. "I saw myself in your story, and I knew I had to get out before it was too late." These conversations reminded me why I'd been willing to share my story in the first place. If my humiliation could prevent other women from going through the same thing, then it had been worth it. 2 years after the wedding that wasn't, I was living a life I couldn't have imagined. I'd started my own marketing consulting firm, specializing in helping women-owned businesses grow. I'd bought a house, a beautiful little craftsman bungalow with a garden where I grew peonies. I'd written a book about my experience, which had become a bestseller, and I was planning my own wedding, a real one this time, with a man who valued me as an equal partner. Marcus had proposed on a hiking trail we'd discovered together, with no fanfare or elaborate planning. Just him, me, and a simple question: "Will you marry me?" My answer had been immediate and wholehearted. Yes. This time, wedding planning was completely different. Marcus and I made every decision together. We chose vendors together, tasted cake together, picked out flowers together. When his mother had opinions about the guest list, he listened politely and then made it clear that the final decisions were ours to make. "This is your wedding," he said to her gently but firmly. "Sarah and I will handle the planning. We'd love your input, but we need you to respect our choices." The difference was striking. This felt like a partnership, like we were building something together instead of me trying to navigate around someone else's vision. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," I confessed to Marcus one evening as we addressed invitations. "What do you mean?" "I keep waiting for your family to take over, or for you to decide that your mother's opinions are more important than mine, or for something to go wrong." He put down his pen and looked at me seriously. "Sarah, that's not going to happen. This is our wedding, our choice, our celebration. No one else gets to make decisions about it." "But what if your mom? What if she what? Gets upset, throws a tantrum, decides she doesn't like something? So what? This isn't about her. This is about us." It was such a simple concept, but it felt revolutionary to me. The idea that a wedding could actually be about the couple getting married, not about managing everyone else's expectations and opinions. The wedding was perfect, small, intimate, exactly what we'd wanted. I wore a new dress, one I'd chosen myself, one that made me feel beautiful and confident and like myself. Marcus cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. I cried during his vows. We both cried during the ceremony. And I was there for all of it. Every moment, every word, every kiss. I was present for my own wedding, and it was everything I'd dreamed it could be. During the reception, as we danced to our first song, Marcus whispered in my ear, "Thank you for walking out of that other wedding. If you hadn't, you wouldn't be here with me now. Thank you for being the kind of man worth walking toward," I whispered back. Looking back now, 3 years after that terrible day at the inn, I can honestly say it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because of the pain, or the humiliation, or the betrayal. Those were truly awful. But because of what I learned about myself in the aftermath. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I learned that I'm worth more than I'd been settling for. I learned that love isn't about sacrifice and service and making yourself smaller. It's about partnership and respect and helping each other become the best versions of yourselves. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. David got married eventually, to someone his mother approved of. I heard through mutual friends that it was a very traditional wedding, with the bride playing a very traditional role. I hoped she was happy, but I also hoped she knew she had choices. Patricia never apologized, but I didn't need her to. Her approval had never been the goal anyway. And me. I built a life I'm proud of. A business that challenges me. A marriage that fulfills me. Friendships that sustain me. I learned to grow peonies in my garden just because I love them. I learned to stand up for myself, not just in big moments, but in small ones too. Most importantly, I learned that your worth isn't determined by how well you can adapt to other people's expectations. Your worth is determined by how true you can be to yourself, how courageously you can pursue your own happiness, and how much love you can bring to the world. Yeah, my story wasn't easy. But I survived, and I thrived, and I became the woman I was always meant to be. And that's worth more than any wedding could ever be. The day I walked out of that venue with the receipts wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the beginning of my real life. The life where I knew my worth, stood up for myself, and refused to accept less than I deserved. And that life? It's been absolutely beautiful.